Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Wildcard Devy podcast. I'm your host for the evening, Phil. You can find me on X, Twitter at PoshPlayersFF. You'll notice I'm on my own this evening. My esteemed colleague and co-host Jack had somewhere he thought he'd rather be. So tonight's episode I have called "Where Is Jack?" And look, we alluded to it at the end of the previous show. Jack had a once in a lifetime opportunity to go and watch his beloved Ohio State Buckeyes in the national championship game. And obviously, that is the big breaking news in college football. The national championship game between Ohio State and Notre Dame. Ohio State coming out the victors. Jack has had a once in a lifetime trip. He has lived it up. He has rubbed shoulders with college football greats like Reggie Bush and Todd Gurley at the Ohio State pep rally. And yeah, meanwhile, I was at work here at home on a Monday. Go figure. But he couldn't leave you all without popping in to leave a little bit of a pre-recorded message. So I'm going to add Jack to the stage and just let him share his experience with you guys.
To be recording a quick video for you from Atlanta, having been to the national championship game. I honestly can't quite believe, firstly, that Ohio State are now national champions, and what an evening, an event, and day that was to cap the most roller coaster style college football season I think we've ever seen across the sport. The event itself was absolutely incredible. Anybody who to get to a college in the States, because I couldn't even comprehend exactly how wild this weekend would be, with the pep rallies, with the marching bands around town, and then in the stadium, the noise in the stadium, the engagement that everybody around the stadium was kept captivated at every moment. And I know that a lot of our listeners will have been to the NFL games in London, which I have too, and some of the things they try there to keep the atmosphere going kind of fall flat a bit. Well, that is not at all the case over here in college games, and I can't speak to an NFL game in the States, but they managed to, obviously for the national championship game, it completely took over the whole city of Atlanta. So the whole weekend has been focused on it, and they've embraced Ohio State and Notre Dame, and it's been brilliant. It's been absolutely brilliant, and such a privilege to be able to be in the stadium to see Ohio State lift that national championship. From a Devy perspective, it was great too. Lovely to see some of our star players that are coming out in this year's draft, most likely. At time of recording, those declarations haven't been made, but they don't need to have been made. So I think Will Howard is boosted his draft stock significantly with this playoff run. He got Quinshon Judkins 3 touchdowns, ripped off that 70-yard game-breaking run at exactly the time Ohio State needed it. You got some of your Notre Dame players making a bit of a name for themselves. We all know about Jeremiah Love, who's not draft eligible, but Jaden Greathouse had a big game in that second half. He also had a really big game against Penn State, so I'm hoping that we'll see him return to Notre Dame and be featured. Great to see Notre Dame have a featured wide receiver. It was someone that we've been excited for in terms of his profile, but lack of production. So that was great to see, and the tight end Mitchell Evans, I believe his name was, had a good day too. He's clearly a popular figure amongst Notre Dame fans. We were sat with some rather inebriated Notre Dame fans from the get-go, and they were loving Mitchell Evans whenever he got the ball in his hands. So lots to look forward to there. I'm gonna love you and leave you in the capable and wonderful hands of Phil and trust him with this episode. Hope you're all well. Catch you in a couple of weeks.
So there he was with his little face. Look at how happy he was watching his beloved Buckeyes take home the national championship. So yeah, listen, just to touch on the game itself and the result. Obviously, Ohio State take the win 34-23. Will Howard did his bit, 231 yards, 17 of 21 completions, and the 2 TDs. Quinshon Judkins, Jack alluded to, was the man who really set himself apart on the evening. 3 total touchdowns, 2 on the ground and 1 through the air. 11 carries for 100 yards with that long of 70. And we're coming into silly season. You may have seen me write about it on X, but people absolutely quick to dive on social media, having not watched a great deal of Quinshon Judkins all year, or maybe throughout his collegiate career, bashing him for not taking that one to the house. Listen, if you know anything about watching running backs and the traits that are going to value highly, it's burst and acceleration at the line over long speed every day of the week. And, ultimately he set up his own touchdown because a play later he took that ball over the goal line and got his score. He also chipped in with 1 through the air on a nice little he found himself open in the end zone and just broke away, extended the play and took that one pretty much free. Other big time performances then. Carnell Tate, 2026 receiver, 2 receptions, 35 yards. Emeka Egbuka became he went over 1,000 yards again for the season, and leaves his time at Ohio State as their all-time leading receiver, which is absolutely mad when you consider he's never really been the number 1 guy on the team at any point during his career. A really high floor prospect that we know is coming into the NFL draft this year. And then the main man himself, Jeremiah Smith, 5 receptions, 88 yards, 1 touchdown, number 1 overall player in Devy. We don't need to talk about him. Interesting that in spite of his happiness at the win, Jack did mention Jeremiah Love. Bottled up on the evening, 4 carries, 3 yards. Not a great showing for him. But then it's because a lot of the time Notre Dame were chasing the game, and game script meant that they had to go to the air more than they would care to. Jaden Greathouse, 6 receptions, 128 yards, and 2 TDs. So at the time of recording, we're now on the Wednesday evening following Monday night's national championship game. The Ohio State and Notre Dame players have got 10 days to declare whether they're entering the draft. So yeah, those names haven't quite gone in yet, but we know what we're expecting. Could any of the running backs surprise us and go back to school? Well, Travion Henderson can't. Maybe Judkins could. Who knows? But I think in terms of the wide receivers, I think it's fairly locked that Emeka Egbuka is going to be declaring. And it'll be interesting to see if any of the other names decide that they're whether or not they want to test the portal. I know Carnell Tate was somewhat tastelessly asked about that in the immediate aftermath of the national championship game, and he simply said that he wanted to go away and celebrate with his teammates, and rightly so, young man. If you do decide that you want to get out of Jeremiah Smith's shadow, he still has about a week to declare whether or not he'd like to enter the transfer portal. So yeah, there's your national championship. One little thing from me on there. Obviously, big Bama guy. Last season, about this time, about pretty much a year ago, when Caleb Downs, the now Ohio State safety, entered the portal and said he was leaving Alabama and that he was going to take his talents to Ohio State. I immediately went away and put 20 English pounds on Ohio State to win the national championship at 9-2. That came in, obviously, with Monday night's result. So I made myself a cool £110. So I was actually pretty happy Ohio State won as well, not least for my mate Jack. So what else are we going to talk about this evening? We've answered the big question. We've answered, where is Jack? We know Jack was at the national championship game. He also took a moment or two to send us another couple of pictures. So there's his view from his seat and outside the championship game itself, outside the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. And there you go, the confetti, the Jumbotron board, yeah. And again, just insanely jealous. There I was at work, and there's Jack sharing those wonderful images with us. So what are we going to talk about for the rest of the night? Well, if you remember the last time you listened to us, Jack and I had a little bit of an open conversation, a bit of out loud thinking, really, about what to do with name, image, and likeness and the transfer portal. And it's somewhat muddying our timelines for that traditional collegiate player who would be 3 years in college, declare as a junior for the NFL draft, and out in 3 and into the league. Obviously, we are seeing that change, and we had a bit of a conversation about how to judge your kind of timelines moving ahead. So, for example, if you were desperate to have Drew Aller meet your roster, or make your NFL roster this year, obviously he's now going back to school this year and will likely come out in 2026. And again, we know that other quarterbacks in particular seem to be the buzz names. Arch Manning, for example, was the other name we mentioned, who really has the kind of run of the decision whether or not he's going to declare in 2026 or 2027. And one of the bits of advice Jack and I kind of came up with was this idea of positional rankings over a 2-year period to try and decipher whether or not, to evaluate prospects and players over 2 years, just in case they choose to go back to school. Rather than declare early. So I've had a little go at practicing what I preach and mixing up a 2026 and 2027 position big boards for the QB, running back, and wide receiver position. Now, to be clear, what I've tried to do is I've tried to limit this to my top 10 players at the moment at each position. Now, I have excluded any incoming freshmen, so you won't see Bryce Underwood in this list, even though there's a potential that once I've had a good look at his tape, the Michigan man might well have ended up on there. What I've tried to do is I'm trying to work in that 2-year window to give ourselves a look at how we can evaluate prospects. Obviously, I've called them 2026 and 2027. That is the first year that a player, or the next year a player, would be eligible to enter the draft. So at the moment, for argument's sake, Arch Manning, although he could ultimately declare for the first time in 2026, may also declare in 2027. So he would be considered a 2026 prospect for this, because 2026 would be the first year he's eligible. So what I'm trying to do then is we're trying to ascertain where the talent lies, which year it's more likely that these prospects could come out, and just generally have a look at the next 2 years and try and forecast where we think talents lie. Are any classes potentially better than others? And what are the chances that these people go back to school? So obviously this removes all 2025 rookies. There are a couple of names that slip through the cracks, and I'll discuss those in just a moment or two when we get to them. So we talked, didn't we, about ranking players in positional blocks, and I just tried to give you my rationale for this rather than ranking by class alone. So instead of targeting a single year for a positional need, adopt that 2-year strategy. For example, if you're rebuilding at quarterback, rank all the prospects who might enter over the next 2 years together, evaluating them in a broader positional pool. That will hopefully allow you to hedge against unforeseen delays, such as a player staying in school, for NIL benefits, whilst also giving you the flexibility to adjust and shift draft projections. By focusing on positional groups over multiple years, hopefully you'll avoid finding yourself locked in and relying on a single class that might come up short. So that's the kind of mindset that I was thinking about when we looked at this. But let's get into it. Let's have a look at the quarterbacks. So going from the top down, I think my top 10 guys at the moment available in the 2026 and 27 classes look like this. Now, you will notice immediately Arch Manning is sitting there at the top. I think we have enough of a sample size of him this year now to know that the kid has the talent to back up the name. the rushing upside was a pleasant surprise, I think, and that sneaky athleticism. And yeah, I really, really look forward to watching him grow into a starter this year. Now, he will first be eligible in 2026. However, with the lucrative money he will likely get from boosters at Texas and the opportunity to really build a strong collegiate resume, and start building that legacy. Arch Manning strikes me as the type of young man who, let's be honest, isn't going to struggle for the cash. He may well choose to, and if he was to declare next year, he'd be declaring as a one-year starter, and we already see that, these guys are benefiting from going back to school and time on task, snaps, games played, game reps, and coming out as better pro-ready prospects. So whilst Arch Manning is a 2026 quarterback in terms of when he is first eligible, I've just got this sneaky feeling he's going to wait. Now, there's nothing more to that than what my gut is telling me, but I wouldn't be surprised to see if Arch Manning actually declares in the 2027 class. So who else is there? Well, Drew Aller, as we know, was being heavily banded around during the college football playoffs. Penn State quarterback, people were talking about whether or not he could have actually chucked his name into the NFL draft for 2025 anyway, because people saw a skill set, a pro-ready skill set that could well have seen him fly up draft boards this year in a class where no one can quite find their top guy and really love that top QB prospect. Now, Drew Aller is going back to Penn State to have another hopeful run at a national championship. They're returning a lot of stars, and he is the headline act. This will be his fourth year. He's a true senior this year. So it wouldn't surprise me if everything goes to plan if we see Drew Aller next year. And being what I would consider a true 2026 prospect, perhaps bumps him up higher over a couple of the other names who perhaps are as talented. Okay. Which leads me to number 3, Lenoris Sellers. Lenoris Sellers is first eligible in 2026, but he is another, I think, that may wait until 2027. True dual threat. He has put on tape some big-time moments this year, and he is going to go early in a lot of drafts where he wasn't taken last year. Really, really impressive season from the young man at South Carolina. And I think there are bigger things to come from him. He is a name that is ascending. And to be quite honest, had it not been for the immediacy of when I expect Drew Aller to declare, I think I may have nudged Lenoris Sellers one higher. Things are really looking up for him. If he's not taken in your drafts, he is a QB that I would gamble on. I'd break all Jack and I's rules because I want a couple of shares of this kid, and I'm pretty annoyed that I wasn't quick enough off the mark last year to make him my guy then. Next up, you've got Nico Iamaleava. First eligible in 2026. He has the benefit now of being a one-year starter at Tennessee. He had some first-year bumps as the starter. We know about the talent, the size, the arm skills, the arm talent, the athletic profile, 6'6". And yeah, look, all the tools are there. There was just some bumps this year. It's kind of well documented now that he looked like a world beater against lesser competition, whilst perhaps struggling in SEC play with some patchy decision making and turnovers. But look, long term, I think the kid's going to be fine. I still bags of confidence in the talent. First eligible 2026, you never know if he gets the projections that he likes and gets the scouting reports that are favorable. He could come out in 2026, but again, there is nothing to stop him holding off to 2027. And that is why these 2-year blocks and 2-year windows are so important to look at. Okay. Next is Garrett Nussmeier. I think Nussmeier made a great decision. Mid-season this year at LSU, there was a lot of buzz about, well, actually, could he be a first-round pick if he declared in 2025? Ultimately, the one-year starter, again, decided to go back to school. He will first be eligible in 2026, and I would expect, if I'm honest, for him to declare in 2026. Pocket passer, looking really good. But I think going back to school this year was the right call. It would have been a year too early for him. Get that sample size, get that time on task. Yeah, really, really promising player. Next one then is the first true 2027 prospect that we'll name in this list, and that's DJ Lagway, Florida QB, came in this year and really became the guy they trusted. We've spoken about DJ Lagway a lot. You know that we're fans. Dual threat, lots of talent. Needs to cut the turnovers down this year, but I think the consistency of being the full-time starter, not splitting time with Graham Mertz will be massive for him. And yeah, the future's bright for DJ Lagway. Easily the best pure 2027 prospect right now based on what we've seen. Next, may be a shock to some, but people who listen to this podcast enough will know that I am all the way back in on Cade Klubnik. Cade Klubnik was first eligible this year, but he probably wasn't going to receive the draft buzz based on a rocky season, a rocky 2 seasons prior to this year. However, this year showed real signs of growth and development. I think going back to school, going back to Clemson next year in an offense that is going to keep 2 wide receivers that we'll mention later. And I believe at the time of writing this, one of the names that slipped through the cracks for me was Antonio Williams. I just couldn't make my mind up whether or not I'd seen him declare for the NFL draft or not. But there's every possibility that Antonio Williams goes back next year as well, which means he's got 3 fantastic wide receivers to throw to. He really, really looked the part this year, smartened up his decision-making, sneaky athletic upside and rushing floor as well for a fantasy QB. And I'm all the way back in on Cade Klubnik. He's one that I'm expecting that redemption arc to continue. Next up, Dante Moore. Now, Dante Moore was a highly sought after incoming freshman in the this is his second year, so this is technically his sophomore season. So it would have been the 2023 class that he was recruited in. And Dante Moore, as we know, spent 1 year as a starting QB. It really didn't go to plan. So he went in the transfer portal and took his talents to Oregon. He has sat on the bench for a year behind Dylan Gabriel. And is first eligible now in 2026. But again, this is a guy, I think I've put him in here more on what we hope him to be and Devy projection rather than anything he's shown us so far. But he is in one of the elite offenses in college football now in Oregon, and a great place for him to have sat for a year, regain some confidence and composure, and he's now looks set to take the reins, like I say, and be the guy in one of college football's most elite offenses, surrounded by high-level top-end talent that can help him develop further. So again, I think Dante Moore, more for the projection of what he can be rather than what we've seen so far. He's first eligible in 2026, but again, that will make him a 1-year starter this year at Oregon. It would not surprise me in any way, shape, or form if he went back for a second. So keep an eye on Dante Moore and look for stock to ascend as the season goes on. I've slipped Dylan Raiola in there. Dylan Raiola obviously was the only one of the incoming freshman class, or the high-profile freshman anyway, that came in this year to start every week at Nebraska. Look, again, there were growing pains, the type of things you would expect from a true freshman. He wasn't exactly surrounded by talent, and he's got a long way to go, but we saw glimpses of just what he could be. And finally, I have included the new Miami quarterback, Carson Beck. Look, Beck's draft stock took a pummeling. This time last year, he was projected to be the number 1 guy in this incoming draft class and a potential 101 overall NFL draft pick. Things did not go well. And I think Carson Beck has made a really, really smart choice in choosing to go back to school. You just seen what moving to Miami did for Cam Ward this year, and I am incredibly hopeful it will do the same for Carson Beck. The top end traits that he's got haven't disappeared. I think he just needs to get a bit of swagger and a bit of mojo back. And in a year's time, hopefully we'll be talking about him as a first-round quarterback again. But if you've got that share, certainly don't sell it. I don't think you'd get enough for it at the moment. I think you just need Miami to string a couple of wins together early on next year for Carson Beck to be a buzzy name again. So there you have it. My top 10 quarterbacks as it projects at the moment over the next couple of years. Moving swiftly on to the running backs then. And it should be no surprise to see Jeremiah Love at the top of that list. Yes, the injury he picked up in the playoffs perhaps limited people's exposure to him and what he can be in the rest of the playoffs and certainly in the college football playoff final. However, he is a fantastic runner, probably one of the best pure runners in college football, full stop. Hence his lofty position on my list as my number one running back when we join those next two classes. You'll notice, please don't say for a moment that I stick to my priors. Right now, with the loaded 2025 class that are moving into the NFL, this, for me, projects Nick Singleton right up those ranks. Last year, you wouldn't have seen him in a top 10 list for me. But looking at the landscape, the growth he showed us, the growth that I just always said all along, look, don't announce him as the guy. This time last year, I was saying, it's not that I don't like him. It was just that we needed to see more. Well, Nick Singleton this year showed us more. In fact, he showed us, pretty much everything we asked to see from him as the season went on. He returns with Drew Aller, with his running mate in Katron Allen, to lead up what should be an impressive-looking Penn State offense. Nick Singleton's year, like I say, he went from 752 yards on 171 carries in 2023 to 1,099 yards on one more carry. He almost doubled his receptions, and just looked a more decisive runner. We said, I just said I wanted to see better decision making as he got to the line of scrimmage and went, and attacked the hole. That certainly seemed to be there this year. We know the athleticism is off the charts. And yeah, look, he deserves the buzz. He deserves the buzz. Now, if you need your 2025 running back this year and you were hanging your hat on Nick Singleton, yeah, sucks you're going to have to wait another year. But I think you're going to get a better player when he arrives on your roster. And that's what we're talking about here. Like, what we're saying now is if you make that plan that I'm going to take this incoming freshman running back, I'm going to get him in 3 years. That's not to say you're going to now, particularly for someone of Singleton's talent at a big school where NIL can pay him the money to stay. Third on my list then is Caden Durham, narrowly beating out. I think you can flip-flop 3 and 4 however you like, but Caden Durham looked explosive at LSU last season, and I cannot wait to see what he puts on tape this year. He's going to be available in an awful lot of Devy drafts because he wasn't even the guy that was expected to lead LSU's kind of charge this season. And, he took that backfield and very much made it his own. He was expected to kind of play second fiddle to Caleb Jackson, and he beat Jackson out to take the majority of the snaps as the year went on. Incredibly talented young player. He had 753 yards and 6 TDs as a true freshman, and I can't wait to see what comes in his follow-up season. Next, I've got Nate Fraser. Nate Fraser, everyone knows by now, he's a big my guy for me. I loved the tape. He was my pick of the incoming freshman class last year in terms of the skill set that I saw, and he had a fantastic season. With Trevor Etienne dipping in and out with injury and inconsistent patchy play, as the year went on, it was really Nate Fraser who became the trusted back in Athens at Georgia. He finished the year with 671 yards and 8 TDs. And I think the big thing for me, although, again, he is a true 2027 prospect, he's going to have a lot of work this coming year. And yeah, I can see him still being a 3-and-out guy because of the opportunity he's going to see for a lot of carries this season and next. Obviously, Trevor Etienne moving on is going to thrust Nate Frazier further into the spotlight. Georgia will always recruit well and recruit strongly at running back, but I kind of feel like Nate Frazier has elevated himself up that draft class, and now looks like he's going to be the guy there for the Bulldogs. Yeah, love the guy, and yeah, he'll be gone. He'll be gone in your Devy drafts because people knew he was good. We talked about him a lot last year. Next one, Justice Haynes. Justice Haynes has slipped a little through no fault of his own. We know the talent is there, but his kind of bit part role at Alabama was frustrating for us as Devy owners. And perhaps very much so for him as a player, which is why he has taken the opportunity to exercise his right to move in the transfer portal this summer. We mentioned it on the last show. Justice Haynes is taking his talents to Michigan, and I think that is a brilliant move for his Devy stock. Right now, he ranks as my number 5 running back over the next 2 years, but I can easily see with an extended run the vacancy of snaps left by Donovan Edwards and Khalil Mullins. That backfield is Justice Haynes to make his own. Support a freshman quarterback in Bryce Underwood and to absolutely make that job his own. I think this is going to be a big, big year for Justice Haynes, and the ludicrous amounts of shares I've got should take a real boost. After that, Jarrett Gibson at Texas, Le'Veon Moss at Texas A&M, Quinton Joyner at USC, all backs who are starting to fulfill significant promise. Isaac Brown, I have put in there because he is an absolute firecracker of a running back. If you don't know Isaac Brown was a true freshman this year who broke onto the scene at Louisville. Really, really impressive runner, and I can't wait to see more. He's a guy who will be an NFL back. I'm absolutely sure of it. And then finally, rounding out my running backs, a little bit of a slip perhaps from where you'd have seen him a year ago, but he is coming off a major injury. CJ Baxter, if he can return to health, obviously I've got Jarrett Gibson bumped a little bit further up because he is still at Texas as well, and has played this year. So there's a little bit more kind of recency bias in terms of what we've seen. But CJ Baxter is a talented, big, physical, strong running back. And, fingers crossed for a full recovery. You should see him bounce back up there, proving his health, reminding everybody what a prospect he was. So that moves on to wide receiver. And again, this is interesting for me because you will notice this is the first position group where the true 2027 class significantly outweighs and perhaps outshines the 2026 class. That's interesting for a couple of reasons. That to me says the 2026 names on that list could well get a bit of a bump in dynasty drafts because of a perceived slightly weaker class at the position. So if they are eligible, they can set themselves apart, rather than wait until 2027 when they're going to be mixed in with your Jeremiah Smiths, Ryan Williams, and then taking a bit of a bump down the board. They've got every opportunity to set themselves apart in 2026 and make themselves perhaps first round money when they wouldn't otherwise. So for me, look, the main guy there is Jeremiah Smith. It is absolutely no surprise. 88 yards on 5 receptions in the college football playoff final. He is a national champion. He should be the favorite for the Heisman next year, and every year that he decides he's going to stay at college. I cannot see him being anything more than a 3-and-out. He is first available in 2027. So, look, it's no surprise. He's not going to be available in your Devy drafts. I think he's going to be too expensive for you to acquire. If you have him, well done. If not, hey, better luck next time. Then you've got Ryan Williams. In most in most collegiate classes, Ryan Williams would absolutely be the guy. I don't think it is any slight at all to be number 2 to Jeremiah Smith. And I still think Ryan Williams has a skill set that makes him the number 2 overall wide receiver across these 2-year group classes. First available in 2027. Who knows what will happen? But right now, he put up good numbers as a freshman. And could well, he's going to be the lead guy in Alabama's offense again next year. Potentially with, it's going to be with a new quarterback, but potentially a freshman quarterback in Keelan Russell. Alternatively, you've got Ty Simpson there, who will probably get first chance at the job. Let's see let's see whether Ryan Williams is able to capitalize on the changing quarterback. Then you've got 2 2026 guys in Carnell Tate, another Ohio State Buckeye. Could possibly, although we don't know yet, could possibly test the transfer portal if he decides he wants to get out from behind Jeremiah Smith and have the opportunity to be the guy. But you've just seen, as we mentioned earlier, Emeka Egbuka, who will go in the 2025 class, leaves Ohio State as their most successful ever wide receiver, in spite of never being the guy, because he was behind JSN, he was behind Marv, he was behind Jeremiah Smith. You can craft your reputation and hone your skill as a first-round talent, as Emeka Egbuka has proven, without necessarily being the guy. Carnell Tate, though, is first eligible in 2026, and looking at the rest of that class, it wouldn't surprise me if he looked to take that route. Obviously, that's not a given. There are other prospects, use Emeka Egbuka again as that example. Emeka Egbuka surprised a lot of people when he went back for his senior season this year. What's to say Carnell Tate couldn't do the same? I think it's very, very much up in the air. But given that he is first available in 2026, I think that gives him a little bit of a bump at the moment. Next on the list, Evan Stewart. Evan Stewart is a name that we've spoken about a lot, widely tipped to come out this year after transferring to Oregon, but it just didn't quite work, did it? That doesn't make him a bad player, and I think Evan Stewart made a great choice for his draft stock to go back and come out in this potentially weaker wide receiver class in 2026. He is going to be playing with Dante Moore, which I think is brilliant for Moore's value. And hopefully will help Evan Stewart as well. I think they can have a great positive impact on each other's Devy stock moving forward. So yeah, wheels up for Evan Stewart as the guy when there's no Tez Johnson on the other side of the lineup and a new quarterback that can hopefully find him with a bit more regularity than Dylan Gabriel did. Next, I've got 2 2027, or first eligible in 2027 receivers in Bryant Westcott and TJ Moore. Interestingly enough, they are teammates at Clemson. Both of them flashed at different stages during this year, whilst kind of having the limelight somewhat stolen by the brilliant Antonio Williams. They are a dynamic duo that I think are going to do incredibly well in the ACC and across college football moving forward, winning very different ways, both equally talented, and I like both moving forward. Then again, you've got Cam Coleman at Auburn, really, really talented. It still bugs me that he's at Auburn, been the Alabama fan that I am. But Cam Coleman has flashed in big-time moments for Auburn this year. And look, he's going to get force-fed in their offense. He's going to get targets. He's going to continue to make brilliant catches. First eligible in 2027. Could be a 3-and-out type guy. Next one's really interesting. Micah Hudson. Micah Hudson, you might argue, has no right being on this top 10 list after a freshman season in which he was used bit part and sparingly at Texas Tech. However, Micah Hudson, as we know, is phenomenally talented, catch specialist, body contortionist, makes unbelievable catches. And, that talent doesn't just disappear. Texas Tech made a very conscious effort to play their more established, veteran players and have an offense which perhaps didn't lend itself to Micah Hudson's skill set. Micah Hudson chose this offseason to exercise his right to enter the transfer portal and has moved to Texas A&M, a team that were screaming out for a big-time wide receiver. Hudson goes there, as does Kevin Concepcion, someone who narrowly missed this list. And again, I think this is the start of a big bounce back on Micah Hudson's tape. First eligible in 2027. When you look at the depth of the class, there's every possibility that, having already seemingly lost a year behind his peers that were in the same recruiting class, every prospect he could hold on to 2028. You know, that's what NAL does. You're at a powerhouse like Texas A&M that aren't short of a penny or two. You know, who knows? Who knows? But I think this move is brilliant for his talent, and it's why I'm not out on him as a Devy prospect whatsoever. You've then got Ryan Winger at Texas. You know, thick, stocky frame, kind of good with the ball in his hands on sweeps and end arounds and things like that, as well as a pass catching threat. Expect to see more of him with Isaiah Bond and Matthew Golden seemingly moving on. So yeah, look for Winger to be more heavily featured in that passing attack in Texas next year with Arch Manning. Last but not least, I have gone back to 2026. There were a few names I could have chosen here. Silly me if Antonio Williams has gone back to school, because if that was the case, he would be that number 10 guy for me. Dane Key and Barry and Brown were also honorable mentions, as was Kevin Concepcion. But right now, I think a healthy again Eugene Wilson could look to have a big bounce back year. First eligible in 2026. He really flashed in his freshman season, which was why so many people were as high on him as they were. So there you go. Top 10 wide receivers across those two classes. Definitely leans towards being a very, very strong year in 2027, which is interesting for those guys who are first eligible in 2026, because maybe that NIL kind of landscape is less important if they want to make sure they get that elevated draft stock, which they could see in 2026. Running backs, again, lots of names to monitor. A big shift with so many talented running backs entering the league in 2025, it would seem. And then quarterbacks, they're the big one. You know, we've already mentioned these guys that are choosing to go back for time on task and reps. And to come into the league as more appropriate managers. So there you go. A little bit of a look at how to perhaps draft in 2-year cycles rather than one, and kind of a look at where I have those ranks right now. So really, that's all we've got time for today. I hope you found that an interesting look. There is absolutely no reason that you can't come to see us again in a couple of weeks' time. Get in touch with me on X. Who did you agree with? Who do you disagree with? Who should have been included that I missed? Because I'm sure there were some. If you remember, Jack and I did a mock draft a year ago and somehow managed to miss out Ashton Ginty. Oh no, these things happen. Okay, so who did I miss? Who do you like? Which prospects do you think are going to have a good year? What do you think about this idea of not being able to nail down with as much accuracy whether a player is a 2026 or 2027 prospect? What is that doing to how you draft? As always, you can come and talk to us at Wildcard Devy. Okay, my X handle is at PoshPlayersFF. You can follow the entire Wildcard squad on X and YouTube. At Fantasy Wildcard, the team are releasing fantastic off-season content. Go and see the Dynasty Show. Go and see Mags, Ali, and James. Kev's better looking and more dynamic replacement. Go and see the Rewind Show. Go see Lewis. Go see Paul. Go see Hannah. Come and see us. Come back and see us to talk more Devy goodness in a fortnight's time. Until then, see you.